All right, let us prepare ourselves. If you will put your hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
Now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now if you just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that you are the ears and the hands and the feet and the voice of God on this planet. You are the ears and the hands and the feet and the voice of God on this planet. The you, the authentic you. Not the puffed up you, not the shrinking you, but the you that understands that you don't need to hide anything anymore in your life from anybody. And the you that understands that what you were hiding doesn't any define you anymore.
That's right.
The planet needs the you that understands and gets that your divinity card can never be revoked because of the mistakes you have made on the planet, no matter if they're little mistakes or huge mistakes. Your divinity card will never be revoked, nor will it ever be an excuse for you to not bring God onto the planet. Your mistakes will never be the excuse you can use to not be the arms and the legs and the hands and the feet of God on this planet here. Well, we are working with a book that is helping us to get clear about who it is we are. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection. Let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. Your Guide to Wholehearted Life. It's a long title. The Gifts of Imperfection. Now, we want to be careful here because we know at our center we are whole, perfect, and complete human beings. We get that. And yet we also know that through life's journey, we have attracted some imperfect behaviors, some imperfect patterns to us. And those imperfect behaviors and patterns and thinking, ways of thinking, have limited who we are. They're covering up who we are. And now it's time to let it go. It's time to uncover who it is that we are on this planet. Last week we talked about the importance of shame stories. Those stories that are in our past that we hope nobody knows about and nobody ever finds out about. Those things that we responded to life in a really funky way. And we're ashamed of it. We're embarrassed about it. But the problem with that kind of shame and embarrassment is it tends to keep us small. We stay small because we don't want to run the risk of being visible. Because if we're visible on the planet, then maybe some of our shame stories might creep out somewhere. They might stick out somewhere and somebody might see them. It's too big a risk. So we remain small. That's not how God wants to use us on the planet. God wants all of us, the real us, in our lives to be here now. Well, Brené Brown, who wrote this powerful, powerful book, says that there are 4 elements that she calls shame resilience. I'm beginning to like that term a lot. It's bouncing back from shame. There are 4 elements to bounce back from the shame that we have from the mistakes that we made. Not that we are, but that we made. The first one is to name it, and then talk about it, and then own it, and then tell the complete story to someone who has earned the right to hear it. Tell the complete story to one person who has earned the right to hear it. You don't need to go tell a bunch of people. Just get it up and get it out. Who has a right to hear it? Who has a right to hear it is somebody who will not judge you. Somebody who won't respond to your shame story like, how could you have done that? Really, you did that? That person hasn't earned the right. Or the other person who often hears our shame story who has not heard the right is that person who wants to tell you their story and makes it all about you, them. No, this is a person who can be totally present with you and who can just hear what your story is without judgment. That's the kind of person. Well, last week we talked a lot about the foundations. Now, to this week, from this week on, we're going to talk about how to, because we're a practical church. We're a practical church. We believe that I can't even say it, the inspiration and application, all that. We believe in that. Can't remember it right now. All right. So here is the last part of this title. The last part of this title is Your Guide to a Wholehearted Life. And in this book, she has 10 guideposts to get us to a wholehearted life. What's a wholehearted life? Well, we're gonna look at it right now, what she says a wholehearted life is. Wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, connection to wake up in the morning and think this: no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and of belonging. Wholehearted living is not a one-time choice. It is a process. See, we want to keep that firm before us, because as we learn new ways of being, as we learn new ways of having a closer walk with God, we want to understand that that is a process, and it takes time. And sometimes we'll fall down. Even in that effort, we will fall down. Our work is to get back up. So we're going to look from now on, for the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at all 10 guideposts. Today we're going to look at the first 3 guideposts to a wholehearted life. The first one is cultivate authenticity, or let go of what other people think of you. Now, you've heard that, what you think of me is none of my business. It's powerful. It's also very hard to do in our life. Being authentic is a choice. It's a choice that we get to make. We get to choose whether we want to show up as being real or not. We get to choose whether we want to show up being honest, whether we can let our true self be seen by other people. Now, I'm telling you, it's hard to make that choice sometimes. And nobody should be blaming themselves or shaming themselves on those days they don't make that choice. Because sometimes it's just too scary. And sometimes we have to work up to it. Sometimes it's just easier to be a people pleaser. We all know what they want to hear. It's not what's in our heart, but we know what they want to hear. And sometimes it's just easier to say that. Don't beat yourself up, but also know this: you cannot have a wholehearted life. You cannot move toward wholehearted living unless you're willing to take that step. E. Cummings says this: to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody but yourself means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting. But here's the thing. It's not fighting anybody else. It's not fighting those people who are trying to make you different than you are. It's fighting that whatever inside of you that wants to people please, that whatever inside of you that thinks it's easier in life if you just go along and get along. See, that preconscious self that doesn't want to make anybody else uncomfortable. See, no matter how evolved we are, we don't like making other people uncomfortable. We simply don't like it. And so we try our very best not to do it. But sometimes we have to make other people uncomfortable to be truly who we are, to be fully ourselves on this planet. See, we want a wholehearted life, you and I. We want that. We want a closer walk with God, as long as it doesn't inconvenience anybody else or ourselves, really. See, we don't want to make those kinds of changes, but until we do, we can't have what we want, what we truly want. Brown says, so much of the act of authenticity challenges the status quo. But she says this, it's not really the act of authenticity, it's really the audaciousness of authenticity. That's what challenges the status quo. Because see, we don't want to be seen as narcissistic. We don't want to be seen as somebody who only takes care of ourselves or is getting too big for our britches. We'd rather remain small than have the audacity to be authentic in our lives. It's kind of a funny thing. Let me see what she says on page 53, because I wrote it in my notes, so we ought to see it. If you're like me, practicing authenticity can be a daunting choice. There's a risk involved in putting your true self out into the world. But I believe there's even more risk in hiding yourself and your gifts from the world. Our expressed ideas, opinions, contributions don't just go away. They are likely to fester and eat away at our worthiness. I think we should be born without warning labels, similar to the ones that come out of cigarette packages. Caution. If you trade in your authenticity for safety, you may experience the following: anxiety, depression, eating disorders, addiction, rage, blame, resentment, and inexplicable grief. Okay? That's what we're trading in when we're not being authentic with our lives. Now, I'm not standing here and saying this is an easy thing. Remember, this is a process. Let's move on to the second one. We need to cultivate self-compassion. Self-compassion. And to do that, we have to let go of perfectionism. See, there are probably zillions of reasons how it is that we could practice getting rid of perfectionism, but the main one is to practice it, is to do it over and over and over and over and over again. Little acts of self-compassion in our lives. See, but she focuses on a primary saboteur of self-compassion being that gripping disease and paralyzing disease called perfectionism. Now, it's not the same as striving to do our best. There is perfectionism, and then there's striving to do our best. We want you to strive to do our best. I want to strive to do my best. I want to do that without slipping in to that thing called perfectionism in our life. See, perfectionism is that belief that if we could only figure out how to look perfectly, how to live perfectly, how to talk perfectly, how to dress perfectly, we could avoid any judgment in our life. We could avoid any blame or shame in our life if we could just figure that out. See, the person who wants to strive to do better in their life is striving because of a need they have, an approval they want for themselves. The perfectionist is trying for other people's approval in their life. So how do you deal with it? How do you deal with perfectionism? She said, by exploring your own fears, by exploring our fears and changing our self-talk. That's a very practical way we can improve the quality of our life, is by simply exploring our fears and changing our self-talk. Now, women, I know you know this, and I believe most of the men in this church know this. We all have body image issues. And our self-talk reflects that body image issue. Oh, I'm so ugly. I'm so fat. I'm so short. I'm so tall. Oh, my hair never looks right. We go and we do that and we do that and we do that, and it just chips away at us. And when we're talking like that, we're trying to please somebody else. We allow the dial on that scale to dictate whether we're lovable, whether we can belong to the cool kids in life. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't want to make changes in our health. It might not even mean we don't want to make changes in the way we look, but we want to do it for ourselves. We want to do it so we can say, I am lovable. No matter what the dial says, I am lovable. Say that with me. I am lovable. I can do this, see? I know how to do this. I can do this. For me, not for anybody else on the planet. Brown says that perfectionism never leads to results. It only leads to more peanut butter. Never leads to results. Never. And I found that to be true. But remember, these guideposts are tough. They're hard. Nobody should feel bad if they, can't make it right away. Sometimes we have to do what we call in recovery, fake it till you make it. She tells a story in which she is upstairs getting dressed, and her 9-year-old girl yells up in this really stressed out voice, "Mom, Bill and Jane are here to visit. Should I start picking up? What should I do?" She said, "I knew the house was trashed. But fortunately, I knew that I wanted to see them more. And so I yelled back down to my totally stressed out daughter, 'No, honey, I'll just finish getting dressed. I'm so glad they came today. I've been thinking a lot about them.'" See, she made the choice. She said then she had to go right immediately to the serenity prayer because she knew she was faking it until she made it. She knew she was worried about how trash that house looked. But she knew that if she could take this little step, she could have a deep connection with people she wanted to have a connection with. And she wasn't worried about being blamed or shamed by how they thought about her housekeeping. There's a guy named Chris Garner, and he says this. He says, when you can have one moment of self-compassion, you can change your day. When you can string a group of those moments together, you can change your life. And that's what we want to do. We want to change our life through stringing a group of self-compassionate moments together. But hear me now, we have to notice what they are and when they're happening. We call this place the Center for Spiritual Awareness because you and I don't even see the little steps we're making toward our good. We have to begin to be aware of, wow, I just had a self-compassionate moment. Oh, I could have killed myself with my language just then. But I decided not to do it. I had a self-compassion. Notice that. So that when it's time to string them together, you know where they are in your memory bank. Remember when we used to say, don't sweat the small stuff and it's all small stuff? That's what we're talking about here. Even my darkest moments, and I've had some doozies, when I look back at them now, I realize had I not sweated them at that moment, had I not made them magnified by my reaction, if I would have seen that in the continuum, yes, they were painful, but in the continuum, had I not reacted and kept it as a small stuff and not sweated it, my life would have been so much better. One of the most dangerous things about perfectionism is that we are no longer willing to take risks. See, perfectionistic people don't like to look stupid. They don't care for that. They want to look good all of the time. Well, here's the problem. If you really want a closer walk with God than you're having right now, you're going to have to do some growing. And you cannot grow and not look stupid. You cannot grow and not make mistakes. It's not possible. So you get to decide. You're a choice. You get to decide, do I want to remain small or do I want a closer walk with God? Do I want to remain small and not take any risks, or do I really seriously want to bring God out on the planet, a planet that needs God so much these days? That's our work. That's the question that we get to ask ourselves. Well, number 3, cultivate a resilient spirit. A resilient spirit. What is a resilient spirit? It's the ability to overcome adversity. Overcome adversity. And we have adversity, sometimes little adversities and sometimes big adversities. My feeling is that you and I are more apt to be able to be resilient on the big adversities, and we let those little adversities gnaw at us and eat at us and build up in our lives. And when we do that, we destroy our worthiness. We really do try and shrink ourselves. Or in some cases, we act like we're something we're not, when what we are is actually perfect at that moment. Let me see what page 64 has to say here about that. Oh, if you look at the current research, here are the 5 most common factors of resilient people. 1, they are resourceful and have good problem-solving skills. 2, they are more likely to seek help from other people. Seek help. 3, they hold the belief that they can do something that will help them to manage their feelings and their cope. They can do something, not drink something, not smoke something. They can do something that will help them to manage their feelings and to cope. Number 4, they have social support available to them. Whether it's your birth family or a family of choice, we need a posse. We need a group of people we can count on, that we can call and say, do you know what happened to me? And they'll listen. They've earned the right to get that phone call. Number 5, they are connected with others, such as family or friends. That's another part of your support system. Resilient people have hope. In this book, she says, people aren't born with hope, and hope is not a feeling. Hope is a thought. That should be liberating to each and every one of us. Because if hope is a thought, we can learn how to have hope during those times. Hopeful people have goals. They're tenacious. They believe in themselves. Hope is learned. Hope is learned. And the most important part of being a hopeful person is being a person who understands how to have reality checks. How to have reality checks in this life. In this media-driven, over-photoshopped world in which we're told everything. We're told how to parent, how to dress, how to talk, how often to have sex, where to live, what car to drive. We're just told everything. If we don't reality check it, we can think we're not measuring up every minute of every day because it's coming at us from everywhere. Now, there are people who say, oh, I don't watch television. I don't know about any of that. Look, it's in the air. It's in the air. She says it's like people who are trying to escape pollution by holding your breath. It doesn't work. It's just everywhere. Our job is not to deny that we live in an over-Photoshop, media-driven world. It's to say, what's real here? What's real and what's not real? And how I measure up is how I say I measure up, not how anybody else says they measure up. It's difficult. You know, my feeling is it's not the big things that get us. Like I say, I think it's the little things that begin to eat away at our worthiness, to make us kind of shrink down, because we don't want to be seen as narcissistic. We don't want to be seen as too big for our britches. Nobody wants to be seen that. And as a result of that, what happens is we shrink. God doesn't want a shrinking person here on the planet for us. You know, I recently, many of you know, got my doctorate. And when you get a doctorate, then you get to put these little things on your sleeves, see? Isn't that nice? Well, I was perfectly happy with my old robe. I didn't want a new robe, and I did not want these sleeves, okay? And Donna said, you have to have the sleeves. You have to have the sleeves because you're going to Las Vegas, and they're going to put the hood on you, and it's a big deal, and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, very nice. In Las Vegas, yeah. So y'all thought the vagina monologues were odd. This is really odd. Okay. So she convinced me. Okay, so we get on the internet, and we look for ministerial robes for doctorate people. And they're mostly all men. There might be 0.8% of robes for women. And the ones that I saw were huge. I mean, they were like, you'd see me walking, you'd see me from Elk Grove coming to the church. So I said, Donna, I can't do this. And she said, well, let's go out to Bereans, or what used to be called Bereans, Christian bookstore, and look for a robe, because you need a robe anyway. The other one's too big. We'll just get a new robe, and we'll have the sleeves put on. So I said, okay. So we go out, we do that, and we get on the internet, and we see how the sleeves are put on and what they look like and everything. And they all have piping, okay? So I go to the seamstress, and I take my stuff and all the little material and the piping and everything. And I said, you know, here's a picture of what has to happen and what it needs to look like. And, you know, when we looked, there was some piping that were red, some green, some blue, some creams, you know, all different kinds of piping. So I said, well, a cream is good. I get the robe yesterday afternoon from the lady, and I'm like, this is way too loud. This is way, way too loud. And I began to shrink. And I began to say, who am I? I'm not a doctor. I'm a drunk, just got off the road. You know? It's so easy to go there. It's so very easy. I still don't like it. I might get a little magic marker and make gray. The point is, it's so very easy. We have to be careful. And here's the last thing I want to say about it, and that is this. When you don't cultivate this spirit of cultivate a spirit of hope, what happens is we begin to numb ourselves. And there are so many ways that we numb ourselves. Many of us in this room know how we numb ourselves. You know, at first we just wanted to take the edge off. And so we started numbing ourselves with alcohol or marijuana or food or the internet or whatever. We just wanted to take the edge off. But there are people right now, and I don't know who you are, but you know who you are, who are wondering if you haven't crossed that line from taking the edge off into addiction. Because uncared for taking the edge off, a pattern of taking the edge off without noticing it, will lead to addiction. And I can tell you, it's very, very difficult to have a closer walk with God when you're constantly under the influence. It's very difficult to understand and see the presence of God that is inside of you when you are fighting addiction all the time. So if that's your road, have hope. There are probably, don't stand up, but there are probably half the people in this church who had hope, who let that getting the edge off move into addiction, and now they're living a life beyond their wildest dreams. Yeah. This is a powerful book. I hope all of you have gotten a chance to pick it up in the bookstore, but if not, you know, just keep coming. I'm going to go through it and with you, and for those of you who don't get it, I'll be going through it for 2 more weeks. I think this is one of the healing books on the planet. You know, Ernest Holmes, our founder, said, always stay open at the top. See, he knew that he didn't bring anything new to the table in science of mind. It's all ancient wisdom that has been reworked so that we can understand it at a deeper level than perhaps we could have if we didn't have him. But this is some of the ancient wisdom also that we want to really get a hold of. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that the presence of God is right where you are, always. And there is nothing greater than the joy and the honor of bringing God onto the planet, whether it's through a smile or through a touch or a listen or whatever it is. It just fills our heart when we can be in service in that way. Not in drudgery service, but in that pulse-quickening service that says, I am here for another human being. I give thanks for that. I give thanks for every person in the church this morning. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.